Good afternoon and happy Sabbath. My name is Salvador Gomez. For those of you that are watching via Facebook or later on YouTube, and we're continuing our studies on the third angel's message. We've been looking at the Sabbath and sanctuary conferences. We've been learning a lot of what they have. When I say they, I'm referring to the pioneers, what the pioneers have been going through their experience in these Sabbath and sanctuary conferences. Mainly, we're able to see the gift of prophecy, the prophetic gift of Ellen G. White. Um, And so at this time, it won't be any different. We're actually going to see the proclamation of the sealing message, how Revelation chapter 7, among the prophecies of the sealing. Uh, and so this is the first Bible verses that we're going to read as we look at the verses and the fulfillment under the third angel's message. And so let's go begin our reading here in Revelation chapter 7, beginning at verse 1. Notice what the Bible says. And after these things, and just a quick note, the things that we read here in Revelation chapter 7 are mainly literal. Okay, so that means that we're not looking at any symbols. These are literal events that are taking place um, here on earth and in heaven. Notice what it says. And after these things, I saw four angels. How many angels? Four angels standing on the four corners of the earth. Okay, on the four corners of the earth. Now, our message is not on Bible cosmology. We're not talking about, whether or not uh, the world or the earth is round or flat. But according to this particular verse, which is a literal verse, does a round earth have corners? Oh. No, it does not have corners.
The four corners is
The north, south, there is a north, south, east, and west.
But these are four literal angels that are on the four literal corners of the earth. Literal. It's not symbolic. No, not at all.
You think something to make it the translation?
I don't believe the translation here is very difficult. I believe the translation on this particular verse is the way God wanted it to be made. At least that's what I get when we go through the history of how it was fulfilled. And that's what we're gonna do today. But notice that we see four literal angels, and they are located on the four corners of the earth. Okay. And so in order for that to be a matter of fact, the world can't be a ball. It can't be uh round. It would have to be a flat earth in order for that to be possible. Um, and so, but that's not our message. That's not what we're not going to focus on that right now.
Just trying to figure out there could be four corners. But I'm talking maybe on the what's land.
That does have four corners.
Yeah.
Yeah,
land.
if it's flat. Yes.
I'm pretty sure. Why would they have to be out in the oceans where the land is where people's at?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be on the land part of the earth.
Exactly.
Mm.
Now, I wouldn't limit it that way.
Yeah, no.
And the reason why I say that is because we have people in the sea as well that actually live on the sea. We have ships. We have people,
Oh, yeah.
people that are mariners, right? They're out on the sea.
Yeah.
And so there's life on land and sea. And when I believe the Bible speaks of earth, it's referring to both land and sea.
Land and sea.
Yeah. And so these angels are located on the north, on the south, and on the east and on the west, right?
It does make sense though.
Yeah.
Because if you have a firmament,
Right.
then you do have four corners.
Yes.
You can have four corners on a firmament. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Even if you can.
Oh, you're referring to when
Like, you have a firmament.
if you believe Bible cosmology,
Yeah.
if you believe that
Yeah.
there is a literal firmament
Yeah.
over the earth, and so we have in
Can have
four literal corners of the
Yeah.
earth. Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I believe as well. Yeah. Again, we're not talking about Bible cosmology. Just wanted to give that little detail. Notice that these four angels are on the four corners of the earth, holding the four winds of the earth. Now, when we refer to the winds, here we have a term that is symbolic. Okay. Right. This wind is the same wind that we find in Daniel 7 when the beasts are coming up out of the sea. We see that they're in the midst of winds. Winds are blowing while these beasts are coming up, and we know that these winds refer to wars, strife, uh, and so they're battling for territory. They're wanting to take over kings. Um, Babylon, Medo Persia, Greece, Rome, all of these uh, empires were won over by conquest, by war. And so that's what we see in this verse, in this particular verse, we're looking at four winds. They're being holden by these four angels. Now, notice why they're being held. That the wind should not blow on the earth, nor the sea, nor on any tree. And so we have a few little symbols uh, referring to a tree, perhaps. But notice that there's no wind or no strife, no war going as far as it being like a world war. Have we had world wars in the past? Well, we're gonna look at how that is fulfilled under these particular verses. We're looking at Revelation 7:2 now, and it says, "I saw another angel ascending from the east." Okay, so notice that this angel ascends from where? From the east. And so not descending, but ascending. We're going to see what that means as well. Having the seal of the living God. Okay. Notice the title. Having the seal of the living God. And he cried with a loud voice to the four angels. So this angel having the seal of the living God, the one that ascends from the east, he says something to the four angels. He cried with a loud voice to the four angels to whom it was given to hurt the earth and the sea. And so the main purpose of the four angels is to hold those winds, to restrain the winds, which mean strife, war, contention among the nations. Those angels are to hold on to those winds until there is a particular time when they let them go. Okay. And so the angel that comes up out of the east cries with a loud voice and lets them know uh, to hold. Until when? Did we get there yet? No. Saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea, nor the trees, till. So this is when they let go. Till we have sealed the servants of our God in their foreheads. Okay. So these four angels are not to let them go, okay, not to release the winds until the servants of God are sealed till they are sealed, um, to the servants of God are sealed in their foreheads. Verse 4, and I heard the number of them which were sealed. This is how many are sealed. Okay. And there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. We're not going to get into whether this is a literal number. We're not going to get into any of those specifics at this time. Um, this will be in a following uh, uh, subject, okay? Or as we continue to study this, we'll get into that. Now let's go to Revelation 14, verse 1. And Revelation 14 is where we began our studies, correct? Remember Revelation 14? In connection with the three angels' message. Now, notice this is the very beginning. This is the first thing that the prophet John saw when, in connection with the three angels' message. And I looked, and lo, Revelation 14:1, and a lamb stood on the Mount Zion. Okay, so here Mount Zion is a literal place. Where is Mount Zion? Israel, Jerusalem. Okay, here the lamb, which is Christ, is standing on Mount Zion, which is in Jerusalem, and with him 144,000. And so this group, the 144,000, are seen with Christ on Mount Zion. Okay. Having his father's name written in their foreheads. And so synonymous to the seal of the living God, we have the name of the Father, or Christ's Father, on the foreheads of the 144,000. Okay, and so exactly, they had the seal, which is the Father's name. All right, we'll get into those details at a later time as well. Verse 2, and I heard a voice from heaven, as the voice of many waters, and as the voice of a great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they, the 144,000, sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders. And no man can learn that song but the 144,000. So here they sing a new song. Okay, and so if we want to have an idea of what this song represents, we could look at Moses, because Moses and the children of Israel, when they came out of Egypt, they sang a song. And there's actually a chapter in Deuteronomy called the Song of Moses. This was the song of their experience, right? And so Moses and those Jews, or the Hebrews that came out of Egypt, had a song to sing because of their experience. Here, the 144,000 have a one and only experience. They are the only ones that will experience this, and therefore it is a song of their experience. Does that make sense? Okay. And so this is why no man can learn that song but the 144,000. Only they will be able to sing the song because of the experience that they have. All right. Now, it continues to say, which were redeemed from the earth. Right? They were redeemed from the earth.
Mhm.
These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. And so as soon as we hear this, in regards to virgins, what does that take us? Matthew chapter 25, it speaks of the 10 virgins, right? And we know that virgins represent a church. Revelation chapter 12, we're able to see that this is a woman, a church, a people that are not contaminated with false doctrines. All right. If you remember, we had studied under the first and second angel. They were they were called to come out of those fallen churches, out of Babylon, right? Which were the daughters of the mother church, Rome. Um, and they were called to come out so that they would not partake of those false doctrines. This is how they were to keep themselves and not be defiled with those women, which were Babylon. For they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. Okay? They follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. Okay, and so when Christ went into the most holy place in October 22nd, 1844, where did these virgins go? They went in with him, right? By faith, they were able to enter into that experience. This is where we began this study, the third angel's message, right? They followed Christ into the most holy place. This door was open unto them. Um, these were redeemed again, similar to what we read in verse 3. These were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. Verse 5, and in their mouth was found no what? No guile. And so in that word guile, we know that that refers to always telling the truth. They do not lie because they are reflecting the character of Jesus. Jesus said, I am the truth and the life, right? No man cometh unto the Father but by me. They reflect the life of Christ. They have the character of Christ. For they are without fault before the throne of God. And so the time comes where the judgment began, October 22nd, 1844. The messages that they received purified them. Uh, they are uh, not contaminated with the false doctrines. Not only that, they are also able to reflect the life of Christ by uh, having a pure speech and not telling lies. This leads them to having a pure life. They are without sin. Okay. The message has purified them and made them white before the throne of God. All right. Now we're going to look at the fulfillment of this message, the fulfillment, the history. This is taken from Gift of Prophecy by J.N. Loughborough. Notice what he says. And again, this is in reference to the Sabbath and sanctuary conferences. So this reference in this book will give us that history. Before me lies a book published by Joseph Bates in January 1849. So he published the book in 1849, but notice the rest. Entitled A Seal of the Living God. That's the title of the book. If anybody wants to read it, it's available online. It's available on Ellen White app. In the book is an account of the vision given to Miss White in the home of Otis Nichols, Dorchester, Massachusetts, on the evening of November 18, 1848. This is where they were having the meeting. This is where she received the vision. Now notice, at that time, there was a condition of war and rioting and confusion, which began on the 22nd of February. So notice the message was given them when?
Second of February.
No, no, November 1848 is when she received the vision. The uh the fulfillment of this history is February the 22nd. Okay. When the event actually happened was 22nd of February of that year, 1848. In the city of Paris, France, Europe, right? And had spread to over 30 of the principalities, states, and governments of Europe. So now we're going to look at the history of what actually happened in this riot, in this revolt in Paris, France. Okay. So that we have an idea of what was taking place. This is important history. All right. Notice. Notice the man here to the right. As we shall see, it was a time of the conflict of the nations of Europe. In the early months of 1848, that light came to this people respecting the sealing message. In a brief consideration of that conflict, its cause and development, we shall see how the light on the message was obtained. Okay. Now we're reading from Questions on the Sealing Message by J.N. Loughborough. Same author, different book. Okay. We have some more details. Notice in the Library of Universal Knowledge, page 536, we read, and you could also find it in the Encyclopedia Britannica, which is available online. That revolution was caused by the French people demanding a republican form of government from under Louis Philippe. Okay. And for a time, there was republican form. The revolution contagion spreading temporarily over most of the continent of Europe. Okay. So there was this revolution that had sprung up. Okay. The revolution was that the French people were demanding a republican form of government. They were protesting, okay, against this man, Louis Philippe. He's the king, okay, of France. Notice from the time of the reign of terror, that's 1798. Remember that? We had mentioned it. In France, the desire of the masses was to secure for the people a greater control of the government. So that's the lesson they learned from that French Revolution in 1798. And to satisfy the craving of the people for national life, in fact, to have a true government of the people, for the people, and by the people. Through the working of the papacy, a Bourbon, Louis Philippe, had been placed upon the throne, and it seemed to be an impossibility to introduce the Pope to submit to any government but that of his own devising. Okay, we're talking 1798. The Pope is back on the scene. He's influencing Europe. He placed Louis Philippe upon that throne, and the people of France revolted against that. Okay, we're gonna see more details. Now, notice here mob burning carriages at Louis Philippe's royal residence. Okay, February 24, 1848. Okay, so 2 days after when it began. The situation caused animosity not only against Louis Philippe, but also against the Pope, who was upholding the Bourbon ruler. At last, pent up feelings burst forth in a conflict. Notice how it describes this conflict as sudden in its developments as the bursting forth of a volcano. Okay. Can anybody see the illustration? The illustration of a volcano bursting, right? Are you able to know when a volcano is gonna burst?
Earthquake.
An earthquake, it could give you an earthquake first, right? The rumbling of the
Earthquake.
right. But for it to just blast out of nowhere, right? You don't know when it's gonna happen. That's the illustration that we see here.
Yeah.
The revolt happens suddenly, unexpectedly.
That's what it says.
Mhm.
First and fourth of one.
Hey, that's right. From facts stated in the Republic prints of the time, it would seem that Louis was not aware of the intensity of the feeling against his rule. For on the 21st of February 1848, he had said, this is the day before, okay? He had said this: I was never more firmly seated in the empire of France than I am tonight. Okay, this is one day before the revolt. The next day, he had a review with his soldiers. After the parade, the soldiers with guns stacked were resting on the ground when a little child with a tricolored flag, you can see him right here, see him? With a tricolored flag in his hand, climbed upon a cannon. He waved the flag in the air, shouting, "Down with the Pope! Down with the Pope!" Probably this was what he had heard talked at home. The soldiers caught up the same, with which with increasing vigor was passed up and down the line. And finally, with the addition, and down with the king. Okay? And down with the king. Let's continue. So what we just saw was the history of how that revolution just out of nowhere began. That's the history of what we read at the beginning of our study, is how the sealing message began. Okay. Um, Now we have details of exactly what happened. This revolt in France, in Europe, sprang up. This is what was um, taking place when we see the agitation, wars beginning. That means that those four winds had let go. Had let go. Okay. Now, what happened? What happened at that time? Well, what did the angel from the east say? Hold, hold those winds, right? But we did see uh the history of what happens when the winds are let go. We see revolution, we see war, we see agitation among the nations. Okay. So now that we have that state of mind, we see the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 7. And now we have the message behind that fulfillment. Okay. He continues in prophetic gift. Modern spiritualism began its wrappings. Remember what the wrappings are? You don't remember that? Okay, so we read from the pen of Ellen White in early writings that there were mysterious knockings in Hydesville, New York. And those mysterious knockings were the development of spiritualism, which were fallen angels or demons that were knocking in the houses. Okay? Scaring people, having people think that they are dead people, ghosts. Okay? That's where that came from. And that would be the beginning of what is called spiritualism, and people would connect that to they would give it a religious covering. They would say that these are dead loved ones that are trying to speak to us, right? And that this would develop in the whole world. When did it begin? At this very time when the sealing began. Okay. So Satan is gathering his people, right? And God is gathering his. With one, we see deception, and the other, we see truth, right? Continues. About the same time that the stir among the nations began, okay, what I just mentioned. The first day Adventists, now who are the first day Adventists? The first day Adventists were those Adventists, Millerites, that did not follow on to know the Lord. They did not follow on to the Sabbath truth. They continued to keep Sunday. That's why they're first day Adventists. Yes. Okay. They continue to, as we're going to see here shortly, they continue to develop new dates for the coming of Christ, and they did not follow on to know the third angel. Okay. The first day Adventists claimed that the stir among the nations, and so their eyes were on prophecy as well. Their eyes were upon what was taking place in the different nations. Okay, but notice how they interpreted it. It said the first day Adventists claimed that this stir among the nations, what was taking place in France, was the rally to the battle of the great day of the Lord, and that the rapping spirits were the spirits of devils going forth to gather the nations as predicted in Revelation 16:14. Now you see some partial truth with some partial false. Okay. The truth was that this was the spirits of devils going forth to gather the nations, the wrappings, right? The spiritualism. But what was not true is that the day of the Lord, or Armageddon, was going to take place. This is the wrong event. Okay?
Yeah.
This was the wrong event. But because in the third angel, they had the gift of prophecy, speaking of the Seventh-day Adventists, they were able to know what was going on in this event. It was Revelation chapter 7 being fulfilled. It was that angel coming from the east to tell the four angels on the four corners of the earth to hold the four winds.
And these were deceived.
These were deceived, yes. That the Lord's coming was immediate. Okay. Now let's continue. At that time, the few who had begun to observe the seventh-day Sabbath had just discovered. Okay, so they had just discovered when? Under these conferences, under the Sabbath and Sanctuary conferences, they had just discovered from the 7th chapter of the book of Revelation a sealing message. Okay, that's what that angel is giving. The sealing message. What is the sealing message? Which must go forth to prepare a people to stand in the great day of the Lord. And so that message, that sealing message, prepares for what?
For the great day
For the great day of the Lord. This prepares us to stand. Okay. There's a question in Revelation that is asked. Who shall be able to stand when he comes? These people. The true Seventh-day Adventist people, the ones that receive this message, the sealing message. Okay, these few said the last great battle cannot come yet. Right, this is what they told the first day Adventists. Uh the last great battle, Armageddon, cannot come yet. For here is a sealing work to prepare a people to stand in that great day. In other words, there needs to be a preparation for that great day. And here it is. This is it, the sealing message. It says, Mr. and Miss White and Mr. Bates were the three public laborers who had then teaching the Sabbath truth and the sealing message. Who was it? Mr., Miss White, and Mr. Bates. Okay. And at the very beginning of this Bible study, we read that it was Bates that had wrote a book called The Sealing Message, right? And then we read also that Miss White was given a vision about this very same thing, right? So they were the ones that were God was using to give it. Now we're gonna also see how James was used. Okay, we'll get to that here shortly. Notice, uh, they, with the few who had already accepted the message, were among the very poor of the world. And so, in other words, they had very little money to do anything. They had very little money. It almost seems like we're in the same situation, right? Notice, on the evening already mentioned, 1848, November 18, these laborers and other brethren met at the oldest Nichols home to pray the Lord to guide them in publishing the sealing message to the world. Okay? They came together to pray. How are we going to give the sealing message to the world? As they prayed, Miss White was taken off in vision. While in visions, he said of the Sabbath truth. Okay, so speaking of the Sabbath truth, this is what she said. It is the seal. It is the seal. What's the seal? The Sabbath truth. The Sabbath truth, the 7-day Sabbath, that is the seal. It is the seal. That truth arises and it is on the increase. Okay. When did it rise? At this time. It began to rise in 1848. Okay. It was just beginning at that time. All right. It says it increases. It is on the increase, stronger and stronger. It is coming up. Okay. Notice the illustration. It arises commencing from the rising of the sun. Like the sun, here's the illustration or the comparison. Like the sun at first cold, it grows warmer and sends its rays. So it's like when the sun is rising, you barely see the peak of the sun in the morning, right? It's still kind of cool.
Makes sense that it's cold at first.
It's still cold, right?
That's the coldest time of the day, if you notice.
Yeah.
Most of the year is that time when the sun's barely gonna come up.
Yeah.
So it throws cold.
It
first.
throws cold first. And so it grows cold. That means its influence is not felt yet, right? But as time passes, time goes on, that influence is being felt more and more and more.
Compare the Sabbath truth.
That's the Sabbath truth. That's that angel that's coming up out of the east is the Sabbath truth. Okay.
Not just the Sabbath.
No.
Everybody uses like the Sabbath, but there's a lot more in it, huh?
Yes.
Saying Sabbath truth, it's a combination of there's more things in it. It's not just the Sabbath. You know how people they just say, well, we keep the Sabbath, but how? There's a truth in it.
Yes. It's more profound than just the basic knowledge that we get in most of the how
to be the seal has to be Sabbath truth, not just the Sabbath.
Right.
We're Sabbath keepers, no.
No.
You gotta have the Sabbath truth.
Exactly.
You gotta know what the Sabbath truth is.
And that is the seal.
In order to have the seal.
That is the seal. And so we're gonna see how that is as we continue. But right now we're looking at the history of how it was fulfilled. Okay, Revelation chapter 7. in connection with Revelation 14. It says, it's like the sun. At first cold, it grows warmer and sends its rays. That's the influence of the Sabbath is gonna be more and more um, felt uh, by by those that are actually living it and preaching it and having that seal in their foreheads. This will become a worldwide known message. Before Jesus comes, this has to go out. Okay, because we're talking about the sealing of the 144,000. Once this number is made up, once the 144,000 are sealed, the next event is Armageddon. The winds are loose. Okay, but here we have at the very beginning of the proclamation of this message, we're able to see just uh a tiny visual of what that will be like. Okay. When we see France in Revolution, 1848, coming up out of nowhere like a volcano erupting out of nowhere, that is similar to what we can expect when the time of trouble actually begins. We're going to see something similar to that. Okay. Now, let us continue. The angels, speaking of the four angels on the four corners of the earth, the angels are holding the four winds. Now, notice what she continues to say after that. Okay. It's four angels that are holding them, right? But notice what she continues to say. It is God that restrains the powers. So God does it through who? Through the angels. The angels have not let go, for the saints are not all sealed. So this is the reason why Jesus has not come back. This answered that question. This answered their questionings in regards to what they had believed. Among other questions that had come, first, what was the sanctuary? That's how we began the third angel, right? What was the sanctuary? And going on, uh, people were believing that Christ was actually going to come because of this revolution in France. They had a better understanding. They had the gift of prophecy. This is why God kept them on the right path. See? And they understand, no, it's Revelation chapter 7 that's being fulfilled here. It's the proclamation of the sealing message that is taking place. It says, the angels have not let go, for the saints are not all sealed. When Michael stands up, this is when the 144,000 are sealed. And Michael, we know, is Jesus. Okay. This trouble will be all over the earth. All over the earth. So all four angels on the four corners of the earth, they let the winds go. Okay. Uh, they, the winds of war, are just ready to blow. There is a check put on because the saints are not sealed. Yea, publish the things thou hast seen and heard, and the blessing of God will attend. At the time that the vision was given, it did really look as if the nations of the world would soon be in a whirlwind of war. That's found in the book of Jeremiah. Speaking of the time of trouble, is going to be like a great whirlwind. Of the situation, United States Senator Coit said, it has seemed to me as if the prerogatives of crowns and the rights of men and the hoarded up resentments of 1,000 years were about to unsheathe the sword of for a conflict in which blood shall flow, as in the apocalyptic vision, to the bridles of the horses. Okay, so he was referring to that conflict in France. That's what it seemed like what was going to happen. But God held it in check. He had the four angels hold those four winds. In a few months, the nations were all quiet again. But this change came on so unexpectedly. Okay, we're talking about a few months in after February 22nd. Okay, notice this. Um, but this change came on so unexpectedly that Horace Greeley, and speaking of it in the New York Tribune, we're talking about the New York um, newspaper, said it was a great wonder to the politicians what started all that turmoil of the nations, but a greater wonder still what stopped it all so suddenly. This was God restraining those angels, the winds. God restrained the winds through the four angels.
Sorry,
Right?
stop.
Everything's just stopped suddenly. It seemed like there was going to be a great conflict.
Should have went out worldwide, huh? Like
That-
a World War.
Yes, if those winds would have continued, it would have been a worldwide uh, war. After coming out of the vision already spoken of, Miss White said to her husband, "I saw what you must begin to print." Let me read that again. "I saw that you must begin to print a paper, small at first, but as you send it out to the people, they will read it and will send you money with which to print it. It will be a success from the first. From that small beginning, the publishing work, was shown to me as streams of light that went around the entire world." Okay. So notice there's a prediction here. The prediction would be what? No, it's the printing of the paper, and that paper going around the world, and then receiving uh, funds from it.
It's gonna pay
Yeah, that it was gonna pay for itself.
for itself, and then we're gonna be able to, that's God's gonna provide to it.
Uh-huh.
for them.
Now, this will be the fulfillment of that prediction. The few believers had faith in that prediction, but were without money to begin the work. Remember, he had already mentioned that they were of the poor class.
That's what
They had no
start with
money.
a little,
Mhm.
little bit.
Many prayers were offered to God to open the way. In June, okay, 1849, the way opened. Mr. White, okay, so remember it was first
Bates.
Bates, then after Bates, well, actually it was actually Ellen White first because she had the vision, and then Bates made his book, The Sealing Message, and then here we have
James.
how James was involved. It says Mr. White having the opportunity to mow 40 acres of grass with a hand scythe. Does anybody know what that hand scythe is?
Se llama como una hoz, ¿no? ¿Será?
Ellos antes no tenían.
¿Será como- Eso es para cosechar, como lo hacen. No está aquí.
Es el os.
Una demostración ahí.
Actually, it would be where's
Says the harvest.
Christ in the cloud?
I think it's on the other.
It's on the other one. No, right here.
Y ahí lo trae. Con uno de esos.
Pero tiene un palo largo y con esa se corta el zacate. 40 acres. So 40 acres of land. He was given the job to cut the grass. With that money thus obtained, in July 1849, he printed the first number of small paper entitled Present Truth. During 1849, through 50. 11 numbers of this paper were printed. And number 5, value number 5 of this paper, we read this statement, which was written by Mr. White. The money our readers have sent in, let me read it again. The money our readers have sent in has been more than enough to print the paper. With the remainder, we have met the expenses of Miss White and myself as we went from place to place to hold meetings. So it was a success from the first. Okay. So they followed the Lord. And that's right.
Dio la clave
Ujú,
y la
ujú.
siguieron.
Y así es como es que seguimos al Señor. That's how we follow the Lord, by following the fulfillment of these prophecies. How from that small beginning was the published truth gone around the world. At the present time, Seventh-day Adventists have 27 publishing houses in different parts of the world. In these houses, over 70 steam power presses are used. This truth is issued from these offices in 67 languages of the world. The literature of the denomination in these languages consists of over 2,700 different books, pamphlets, and tracts, and 126 periodicals, either weekly, monthly, or quarterly. Each one of the smallest papers is about the size of the first paper, Present Truth. Up to January 1911, over $11 million worth of books had been sold. Publishing houses, sanitariums, schools, missions are established twice around the world, both north and south of the equator. That prediction, which looked preposterous to our opponents in 1848, is surely in a well advanced state of fulfillment in 1911. Okay.
Wow.
It took a while. 1848 to 1911. How much is that, Tomas?
19,
To 1911?
263.
63 years? Yeah, it took a little while. But the words of the prophet were fulfilled.
I wonder if any of those prints are still around.
I believe so. I believe we're reading from some of them.
I mean, the originals
Oh, okay.
that were sent. I
Uh,
bet you they are, huh?
I
Even the-
I think we might have there's Adventist archives. If you look you can look that up on Google, and you can see, I don't know if it's a very large range, but there is quite a bit.
There's some out there, huh? There
yeah.
has to be some out there, some
Yeah.
left out there.
Yeah.
And the equipment, I wonder if there's some of that equipment around, that old antique equipment.
It might be.
Sí,
might be.
equipo que usaban,
Yeah.
porque eran de vapor,
Yeah.
eran
Steam
maquinarias
press.
de vapor.
Yeah. And that's the end of the study. Please stay tuned for the following part of this study. We'll go into more details on the sealing message, as far as what our pioneers believed in regards to it, because there's many winds of doctrine today that have been developed over the years after the passing of our pioneers, which have changed the viewpoint of what this message actually is and how we're sealed. Most Adventists today, if you were to ask them about this sealing, they believe that those that are sealed will never die. Jan Lothbrough answers these questions and more um, and how we are to understand the sealing message. He was uh, the church historian. He was able to go and write down all of the history of the Seventh Day Adventist people, from the first, second message all the way down to the third. And so we'll go ahead and get into more details on the 144,000 and the sealing in our next study. Okay. May God bless. Thank you so much for your time.